What is good? Good evening, one and all. Happy Halloween to all of you kids and to you want to be kids. I am Gator Jay. He is Zach Pellowski, aka Ron Burgundy tonight. This is Fantasy in Frames, Week 9 Waiver Wire Show. It is time to dominate your fantasy football waiver wire. We're going to give you our priority ads, your deep claims. Let's get it. Welcome to the Fantasy and Frames Waiver Wire Show tonight. Zach and I will get you set for Week 9. Remember, this is part of the Fantasy and Frames podcast, where you can listen on Apple, you can listen on Spotify, you can listen right here on YouTube. We got the Dynasty 365 for your Dynasty content, Fourth and Frames, week-to-week redraft, in-season content. Shoot the Gap is the IDP show. All of those shows are right here Wednesday night, 8 to 10 o'clock, as well as our Fantasy and Frames Waiver Wire show on Tuesdays and our Mailbag show on Thursdays. And even more importantly, the Sunday morning start-sit show starting at 9 a.m. going all the way up to 12. Unless Nate's hosting, then it goes to like almost 1. But we'll forgive Nate for that. Don't forget to follow Zach over there on Twitter at Behind the Zach, myself at Fantasy J. More importantly, follow Fantasy and Frames at Fantasy and Frames. If you're over there on Twitter or on Facebook and you want to interact with us, please join us over on the YouTube side. We will answer all of your questions as we get to them. With all of that said, Zach, let's start it off. Who's your waiver claim for your quarterback this week?
I think before we jump into that, we have more important news to discuss. I think you need to tell us about at least a little bit about your trip. For the folks out there that don't know, this man went down to Tallahassee.
No,
right?
Hell no. Hell no to the no. No, we don't go to Tallahassee.
I know. No, but my man went down to University of Florida and watched the Florida versus Gator, or the Gators versus the Bulldogs game. Tell us about it a little bit before we jump in.
It was hot. It was hot, like 90 degrees hot in the sun, just sitting there baking. You couldn't even, you couldn't even smell somebody else's body odor because you were smelling yours so bad. You were sweating so bad. No, it was a great time all together. It was a party from the time I got there about noontime on Thursday till I left there at about 10 o'clock Sunday morning. It was an absolute party the whole time. Great fun. The best part about it, Zach, is it's SEC football, so you don't have to, it's a rivalry game, but you're hanging out with their fans and our fans, and it truly is a camaraderie because there's nothing we can control anyway, right? It is all fun. Most happy about is my voice is starting to recover from the Vanilla Ice, Tone Loc, Montreal Jordan. It was again, like a party all weekend.
I'm glad you had a party. Some of us, like myself, did not have a party because, there was just more things going down at the quarterback position. And that's where we got to take it first and foremost, is we got to jump into the waivers, jump into that quarterback position, because more guys all over the field across the league are just falling over. What's going on? I don't know. Do I like it? Absolutely not. First and foremost, though, Russell Wilson, he's on a bye this week. He's 48% owned. Trending 0%, just steady at that 48% right now. He's QB 11 on the year. I understand the concerns. It's Russell Wilson. It's the Denver Broncos offense. The dude has been consistent all year long. Worst week was against Kansas City, 10.9 3 weeks ago. We gave him love and praise last week. There's not too much we need to discuss further, except he went out there against Kansas City at home this week and put up 23.56. He had only 19 pass attempts, but 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. So if he's still available, you got to jump on that now. We've discussed it before. Very favorable end of the year schedule for those playoff matchups. So first and foremost, Russell Wilson. Thoughts there, Jay?
No, you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, we talked about him last week. The one game that we thought was going to be a questionable game, they were 0-16. 0-16 against KC. Yes, the defense did their job, but the offense did their job as well. 1-17 against the Chiefs the last 17 games, or over the last 17 games, 1-16 over the last 17 games. Look, like you said, we understand the concerns, but look, turnovers are part of the game. That's going to happen. We're going to talk about a guy here in a few minutes that consistently 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. We'll take that. But that's what Russell Wilson's doing, right? He doesn't have the turnovers. You would have thought when we brought this up last week that when we compared Patrick Mahomes and Russell Wilson, if I just gave you a stat line, you would have picked Patrick Mahomes is the stat line, and it's actually Russell Wilson. Only 4 interceptions on the year.
I think we just jump into that next subject. I think just take it away, because I think that's exactly where we need to go. I mean, when we talk about guys that, they're putting up points. It's not necessarily sexy, but they're doing the job. Lead it away, please.
Yeah, no, I will then. We talked about him. I brought this man's name up a few weeks ago, and his name is Sam Howell. And here we are yet again talking about him again because he's only 47% rostered. I know Jorge, before he goes out trick-or-treating tonight, is sitting there jumping in his chair. Yes, we're going to keep talking about these Washington Commanders. They're giving away their defensive guys, but their offensive guys, they are absolutely holding on to. Look, again, 39-52, 397 yards this week, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Insane. And when I brought him up a couple weeks ago, I said that he had a good week against Philly, and he turned it around again and had another very good week against Philly. As good as that defense is in Philly, for whatever reason, Sam Howell has their number. Yeah, they didn't win the game. I'm not saying that they win the game, but Sam Howell has their number. He's got 13 touchdowns on the year, 2,100 yards. Yes, he's thrown 8 interceptions. Who cares? I don't. I'm not telling you he should be your main starter, but in a super flex league or a guy to step in on a bye week, because guess what's coming in week 9? Week 8 is over. Week 9 starts bye weeks again, and we're going to have to fill those holes. Sam Howell is a perfect guy to fill those holes.
Absolutely. No, I love Sam Howell. Down 11% trending wise. People jumped off of him a little bit last week. This is where everyone's trying to jump right back on. They
QB8.
saw it. And I'm sorry, this is not a guy I want to depend on week in, week out. But in a QB1 league even, he's worth having on my bench as a guy that I'm going to spot start depending on the matchup. Because if you look, when he's played against top-tier defenses like the Bills early in the year when they were healthy, he only had 4.6 fantasy points. When they played against the Giants in New York, 10.46. Those are his toughest matchups and his worst weeks. The schedule does get worse in certain weeks coming up the rest of the year, but there's other starts along the way where I definitely want to be playing him. So with that in mind, I don't want to be depending on him week in, week out for the rest of the year, but I do want to have him on my team and have that option and that flexibility, because that flexibility can be very key depending on the matchups come late in the year.
Yeah, and to add on to that, he's QB8 on the year.
And it's not consistent, but when he's there, he's all the way there. I mean, he QB1 last week. Week 6, QB8. Week 5, QB5. So 3 times top 10 now.
Yeah, but when you look at his PPR numbers, or I'm sorry, when you look at his numbers, overall numbers, he's only truly had 2 bad games out of the 7 or out of the 8.
Because his worst outside of that is QB14. Yep. No, he's been consistent. You just want to avoid those tough matchups. But I mean, I guess the only one I'd really be circling right now is at Dallas, week 12, and otherwise at New York Jets, week 16, but and San Francisco, week 17. But I mean, I might not even be as nervous about the San Francisco one right now.
Not the way we saw the last 2 weeks.
No. So that's where right now, if I'm only really worried about those 2, that's a lot of weeks where I can get a lot of production out of Sam Howell. And at 48% owned, that's a great steal. Week 9, guys like that shouldn't be available at this point in the year. That goes for Sam Howell and Russell Wilson, QB8, QB11 on the year. And I think with that in mind, we need to focus more on that next tier of guy. With that in mind, next guy on my list for this week was 35.3% rostered on Sleeper. That's Mr. Baker Mayfield down in Tampa Bay. Playing at Houston this week. He's QB18 on the year. He's not necessarily anything too enticing, but again, he's been consistent. He had 1 week in single digits, at 7.84 against Detroit at home. And then in week 3 at home against Philly, 13.04. Otherwise, he scored at least 19.2 points every week. It's not sexy. He doesn't have those. He hasn't eclipsed 30 points yet this year. He's yet to do that. It's not these big boom games, but it's consistent. And if you have a good enough team everywhere else, that's the kind of spot start you want, because he can at least get you that 15 or 20 that you need to stay in your matchup. And that's the kind of guy we realistically should have our expectations set on trying to get in waivers. Obviously, if the Russell Wilson, Sam Howells are there, we want to prioritize those over Baker Mayfield. But out of realistic options that are available in 1 QB leagues, Baker is a great choice, especially this week, but in general, the rest of the year. And I do like his end of year schedule. Thoughts on Baker?
No, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. His end of year schedule is Atlanta, Green Bay, Jacksonville, and in New Orleans again. But no, I love Baker. And you brought up the 1 quarterback, and I completely agree. If you're in a 1 quarterback league, you're probably not worried about Baker Mayfield. But if you are, again, in a super flex league, Baker Mayfield, very much like Sam Howell, is that perfect, second quarterback or a bye week stand-in.
He's that QB. He's that ideal QB3 if I'm a contending roster in a super flex league. Baker Mayfield is that third option I would love to have. And I think he can be a band-aid for a lot of rosters in super flex, regardless of who your other 2 QBs are. There's a lot of teams where I went super young and I have CJ Stroud and Bryce Young, and Baker Mayfield's the perfect kind of cheap asset in the super flex dynasty leagues that I'd want to acquire.
When you said cheap asset, I thought you were going to say something else there, but cheap ass something or other, but I didn't.
Yes, that as well.
Because he is cheap. He is very, very cheap. You can probably get him for less than 10% fab?
Yes, less than 10%. Yeah. Howell Wilson, I would say 15% plus. We can agree there.
Yep.
But Baker Mayfield, I would say 10% or less. And that would apply for the next guy. If you want me to just jump on in,
go right ahead.
This is a guy that he's been something to start the year. He's a rookie. He's up in Carolina. It hasn't been pretty. Mr. Bryce Young. They're playing at home against Indy this week. 25.9% rostered across sleeper redraft leagues, up 3% from last week. QB 27 on the year. It has not been pretty, but again, he only has 1 week in single digits. That was Minnesota week 4. Since then, he's at 26.28, 14.68, and 16.5. While it's nothing necessarily sexy, it's, again, consistent. I don't see any single digits in here except week 4, and it looks like he's consistently progressed from the first couple weeks. It looks like he's acclimating more at the NFL level. Looks like he's really building up a rapport with Adam Thielen. Tommy Tremble got some red zone targets now. Mingo, Downs. There's some reason to at least believe in that passing game relatively. We already expect that team to be trailing a lot, so I anticipate more passing volume. I mean, so far this year, Bryce Young's had at least 31 attempts in every game, so I love that. And if he's not turning the ball over a crazy amount. I mean, week 1 he had 2 picks, and week 5 against Detroit he had 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. But in the other 4 games, he hasn't thrown any interceptions. So with that in mind, I think as the year progresses, it can only get better. And again, very favorable matchup down the stretch. Week 14 at New Orleans, week 15 Atlanta, week 16 Green Bay, week 17 at Jacksonville. I feel really good about that. Do you thoughts on Bryce Young?
Yeah, I love Bryce Young's playoff matchup. I truly do. But you've said this a couple times on this show, and and on other shows. When you're building your roster, you're not necessarily, especially in redraft, the rookies. You can't depend on the rookies, right? We've got to see them do this. Now, the one thing I will say about Bryce Young is Carolina did him 0 favors. Yes, they got him, Adam Thielen, who is right now is wide receiver 8. But their next wide receiver that is even close to being classified in wide receiver area is DJ Chark at wide receiver 65. We all thought Miles Sanders was going to be something. He's running back 48. It's they didn't give him any weapons. Mingo's been there, but he's still a rookie as well. It's going to take a little bit of time with Bryce Young. I can see adding him now, especially with what they have coming up with Indy, Chicago, Tennessee, Atlanta, Green Bay, Jacksonville. Even though Jacksonville's a damn good D, but that now you're getting into that softer part of their schedule. Now's the time to go ahead and add him to your roster if you have that open spot.
And that's where, he's someone that I expect to be more available and you don't have to necessarily fight over.
Mhm.
With that in mind, the other rookie that I wanted to give some love at the quarterback position, this is one you're going to have to spend a lot more on.
Yes.
He's only had 1 week, but 7.5% rostered, up 4%, QB 36 on the year after 1 week. He was QB 6 in week 8. The man's name is Will Levis. He brought D Hop out of irrelevancy. Treylon Burks still very much so irrelevant, unfortunately. But they were slinging that rock around. Jay, I'll just let you.
Yeah, I mean, he threw the ball 29 times, 19 receptions, 238 yards. He added 7 rushes for 11. The dude's his first career game in the NFL, he went nuclear with 4 touchdowns, 0
Picks.
interceptions.
Zero
That's,
picks.
And now, not saying that Pittsburgh has a bad D, but that's who he faces next. It's not going to be, they didn't get rid of Henry. They still have Tajay Spears. Burks will be coming back sometime, hopefully this season. Not saying Tennessee is going to knock the Jacksonville Jaguars out of the playoff contention, but Mike Vrabel has already put him as the starter for next week. He's already said it, and it's only Tuesday. Tannehill can be dust, I guess, by next Tuesday, and Will Levis will be taking this job. We wanted to see this. Now we're seeing it. Like you said, he's 10% owned right now, 7% owned, somewhere in that range. It's time to go ahead and add him to your roster and just let him sit there and cook like he did last week.
If he hits against Pittsburgh, the sky's the limit because you got at Tampa Bay, at Jacksonville, followed by at home versus Carolina in Indy, and then at Miami. I mean, it's just the whole rest of the stretch is favorable. And with that in mind,
well, hang on one second before you go further. The playoff schedule for him as well is pretty nice. Houston, Seattle, Houston.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, okay. Yeah. Add him to your roster.
And that's where I would say I'm going to have to spend more, and that's where I wanted to put Bryce Young on the radar as well because he's going to be a cheaper one. If you're willing to spend 15% or more, then you could go after someone like Levis. I would put Levis in that same tier as Howell and Wilson in regards to priority, and then Mayfield and Young after that. But Levis is definitely still one that you don't want to be depending on right now. I'm not going to be throwing him right in my lineup if I pick him up. It's one where I want to wait and see and hope for the best while he's on my bench because worst comes to worst, say it is an ugly second week and it looks like Tannehill is going to get the job back, then we can cut him at that point. But we want to wait and find out. And that's where I would still put Levis third on my priority behind Howell and Wilson because I feel a little bit more secure in what I'm using the FAAB on. But until then, hey, why not? We got to take some risk at some point, and Will Levis is the kind of risk you want.
Yeah, I agreed.
I don't know if
I was just saying, do you want to move on to running back, or you got another wide receiver we need to quickly look at?
I just want to say I don't know if there's as much risk moving from the quarterback to my top running back. That top running back on my list this week would be a Mr. Ezekiel Elliott for New England. Right now he's 52.2% rostered, trending 2% upwards. RB 38 on the year. Hasn't been pretty. This past week, 42% of snap, running back 58 on the week, 7 attempts for 36 yards, 5.14 yards per carry, 0 targets, 0 receptions. So now 3.6 fantasy points. Not good, but if you go through the running back position on waivers right now, not good pretty much sums up everything that's available. between buys, injuries, and everything else, this is a year where a lot more running backs are being rostered
Mhm.
just due to scarcity. And with that in mind, your options are going to get a lot uglier, a lot quicker at this point in the year with waivers, especially at a position of need like running back. That's why Zeke is number one right now. It's not pretty, but at the same time, they keep trying to give him some workload. And at that point, I want to risk it and find out because, if Ramondre goes down, I'm going to trust that's going to be Zeke. Ramondre hasn't been good. I could see him getting in trouble in regards to just, losing snaps as well. They are paying Zeke for this year. Um, Again, the expectations aren't high. It's the running back position right now. And yeah, Zeke is the top option in my eyes, but not necessarily thrilled about it. Jay, what are your thoughts?
No, I'm not thrilled about Zeke. I'm not thrilled about Ramondre Stevenson. That running game is just meh,
Can
up
we
there at meh.
agree that's the current sentiment of like running back waivers is meh?
No. I think there might be a couple out there that are available, either at that 50%, maybe a little bit more, even a little bit less.
Yeah.
One of them I talked about last week, and that's Royce Freeman. When I brought him up last week, he had done the week prior, he has 12 rushes, 66 yards. That's when I brought him up the first time. I'm bringing him up again because this week was even better for him. 9 rushes, 44 yards, and a TD. But the probably the more important thing that we as fantasy folks look at is the snap share was completely flipped from him and Darrell Henderson. It was 53 to 46, I believe it was, and now it's absolutely the opposite way. Whereas Royce got more snap share than Henderson did. If and it's progressively going up for them as the Rams, the Rams are going to be a pass team.
Something to emphasize as well is we got to keep an eye on Stafford and his UCL sprain on his thumb because that could impact the run game and therefore just more volume towards
Yes.
both D Hendo um
Yeah.
and your
I
boy
mean,
Royce Freeman.
I want to bring it up real quick because I've got Royce Freeman is 20% rostered right now. Darrell Henderson's only at 57%. I could say the same thing for him because he got the touchdown the week prior, didn't get it this week. Maybe it could be flip flop back and forth, but this is something to keep an eye on with these two. I'll give you one more real quick one just to keep an eye on, and probably if he's available in your leagues, you need to go ahead and roster him. But plays on Thursday night. The lead running back is still questionable. Had a limited practice 2 days in a row. Tajay Spears had a limited practice yesterday, but a full practice today. I understand it's the king. He's only got 1 day before game day. They didn't trade him, so they're going to play with whether they had a conversation or whatnot. Cool. I'm glad he's still a Titan. Deserves to retire a Titan. But they do have Tajay Spears there, who is going to be a factor. Just wanted to highlight Tajay Spears there. Go
I
ahead,
like
Zach.
I like Tajay as well. I think Tajay is a name we definitely want to keep an eye on, especially with 4 days rest. No, that could be crucial there. Also, in the running back room, a guy that we gave some love to last week. Got to give love to him again. This past week, RB 29 on 31% snap percentage played, 10 attempts for 41 yards, 1 target, 1 reception, also for 41 yards. So 82 total yards. That is a Mr. Pierre Strong, 16.4% rostered, up 14% from last week. RB 62 on the year. Playing against Arizona, like the matchup, like what I saw last week. Have to feel good about that. I think he's kind of the gem of the running back waivers right now. Um, I like what you were saying with Tajay and with the running backs in LA. But if there's one running back I want over everyone else right now on the waivers, that would be a Mr. Pierre Strong. Just with the quarterback questions there, I'm going to trust that those running backs are going to get fed. Kareem Hunt didn't look good, you know. I don't think the expectations are necessarily high on Pierre Strong, but I like him, and I'm not expecting Jerome Ford back anytime soon. Jay, your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I just because I wanted to see what the numbers were. It kind of looked like a three-headed monster last week. all right at that 30 to 33% range, snap share, which is, I guess, something we need to expect out of that backfield without having a Nick Chubb there, right? And then if Deshaun Watson plays, don't know if he's going to play. We don't find out till like an hour before game time. At that point it's going to be a running game,
Yeah.
and
And
then they're
I
going to
think
have
it's
all
going
three
to
of them
be
running.
even if Deshaun's there. And if Pierre continues to impress, I could easily see that becoming a two-headed
Mhm.
backfield as well. Because, I mean, very limited workload, but very productive with his time on the field. If you keep doing that, you're just going to get more snap share.
Yeah, I think the only other thing he needs is to get a few of those. What do they call those things when you hit the painted area? What are those? That we haven't seen.
Oh, oh. I mean, I'm a
Those aren't
Packer fan.
inners.
I'm
Oh,
a
yeah,
Packer
you
fan,
wouldn't
so I
know
don't
anything
know.
about touchdowns.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard of them. Haven't seen one in a while. Yeah, haven't seen one in a while. No, last but certainly not least, a man that has also never seen the end zone. That is because he's a rookie that was hurt. He was on the IR, brought off the IR, moved to the practice squad for the time being. They were trying to give him another week so he can be fully healthy. This is a guy that's 3.7% rostered, down 3% in trend because he was moved to the practice squad. I'm telling you, we don't want to overreact to that right now. This is a guy that we're not going to have to spend a lot, or if any, I don't think we'll have to spend anything on Fab to get him. But that's Keaton Mitchell, running back for the Baltimore Ravens. With that in mind, this is a guy that I've had on my radar all offseason. Someone that, fell through the cracks, and he's on a team that kind of always goes through running backs. Right now, Gus Edwards kind of is the main dude, Justice Hill as well. But I'm expecting Keaton Mitchell at not this week, but in week 10 and going forward to be a part of that backfield on the 53-man roster. And I do think he gets a shot. This is a running back room where we see a lot of different guys get fed, a lot of different opportunities are created. And someone like Keaton Mitchell could be a real nice diamond in the rough at 3.7% rostered for a late season push in a very scarce position of running back. Any thoughts on Keaton Mitchell before we move forward?
Well, it's not necessarily on Keaton Mitchell. It would be on the Ravens backfield because, like you said, that they go through running backs, and that's why there is like 6 of them on their depth chart because they'll just plug and play backs. And if it could be Gus Edwards this week, it could be Justice Hill, it could be Melvin Gordon. It's interesting to me that when you look at their depth chart, that Keaton Mitchell, who is, like you said, just put back on the practice squad after an injury, is still listed as 4th on their practice squad or on their depth chart.
Yep.
Which means it could be a real quick turnaround for him to be back on that roster
Yes.
and
No,
getting opportunity.
I fully expect him to be utilized at some point in this year. This was a guy that there were strong reports coming out of camp, and they kind of just faded because Dobbins was healthy, Edwards was healthy. All these guys where he was way down the pecking order. But that opportunity is slowly kind of presenting itself, and he's someone that right now I want to go buy for nothing, have him stashed on my bench, and then I might have a running back to play come week 15 or 16, right when I may need it most. So that's where I'm trying to think ahead, trying to be a little creative, but Keaton Mitchell's a guy that's been on my radar for a while, and I think it's time he's finally going to show some promise.
Yeah, I think if that's something to be, ear to the grindstone and listening, and if you hear his name brought up by Harbaugh or any, valuable person that you take value out of, any person that you take value from when they say his name, if they say his name, you better go ahead and have him rostered. Because there
It,
could be some movement over the next week with him.
and if it's one of my redraft teams where I'm really deep at wide receiver already, top heavy, where I'm not considering a guy that's 50% rostered ever in my starting lineup, I wouldn't necessarily have issue with dropping that guy now to go try and plan ahead at a position that I might need more. So that's where some of these flyers, the Pierre Strongs, the Keaton Mitchells, the Royce Freemans, Tajay Spears, those kind of guys, I'm trying to stash as many of those pieces as I can right now, especially at the running back position because it's such a bleak position and it seems like every week another big name is going down with an injury or, some sort of issues coming up where they're just not producing the same. So with that in mind, I want to go get greedy with my running backs now because it could really pay off in that home stretch.
No, I 100% agree that this seems to be the year to have 12 running backs in a 13-man rostered team.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is because
Yeah.
they're just down so quickly. Well, let's move over to the wide receiver position, and I'll let you start with your priority waiver claim of your wide receiver.
He's playing against a team that's down bad, just like the running back position. This is Rashid Shaheed, week 9, playing against the Chicago Bears. He is 35.3% rostered right now, 0% Trent. Wide receiver 33 on the year. Derek Carr has been slinging the rock around. We've seen some consistency here, but Shaheed just consistently looks like the deep ball threat that they always want to find now. He actually only played 27% snap percentage this week, which was the lowest of the year. Second time this year, he played under 50%. Funny enough, though, third time this year inside the top 12 at wide receiver 8, 3 targets, 3 receptions, 153 yards, and a touchdown. 51 yards per catch. 3 touchdowns on the year. He doesn't have a lot of receptions, doesn't have a lot of targets, but when he gets the ball, it's for a big play every time.
Like you said, he was only there for 27% of plays.
Yeah.
But he was the most targeted wide receiver. I mean, well, not most targeted wide receiver, but he 3 of 3 with a touchdown for 153 yards. And I'm not a Shaheed fan by no means.
Insane. And we have bye weeks approaching. And this is where I'm looking at a week 9 matchup at home against Chicago and a week 10 matchup at Minnesota. This is the kind of play I might want. Bad matchups, and it looks like, yes, he's very much so boom or bust because 4 weeks in single digits, 1 week at 10.3, and then 18.3, 19, 24 point. So he's very much so, high ceiling, low floor. But with that in mind, these are the kind of risks we have to make. And at 35.3 rostered, wide receiver 33 sounds like a great deal. And I don't have to spend a lot of FAB in the process. Jay, what are your thoughts on Rashid?
I just because I just wanted to see how stupid the numbers were. I just looked at just a quick glance comparing him and Devontae Adams. Realize you're only 100 yards off, right? I mean, it's insane. What he gets done on the field is stupid. With everybody knows it's not Olave, it's not Michael Thomas. They're involved, but they're not the primary target is Shaheed for some ungodly reason. And maybe not the primary as far as targets, but again, it's yards, the yak yards, the deep passes, the touchdowns, those sort of things. 479 yards already on 23 receptions. 3 touchdowns.
There's only one game where he's had a reception where his yards per catch have been less than 10.
He is absolutely a true flex play.
Yes. Never anything more.
Going in your starting lineup as far as a wide receiver position, but he's a true flex play. I mean, I guess when you look at the numbers, he is, he's a wide receiver 3. But still, I mean, I don't know how, if he's available in your league, you don't go ahead and throw him on your roster unless you're just loaded at wide receiver.
And if you want a safer play at wide receiver, you don't like the boomer bust of Rashid Shaheed, I would really consider the next guy, someone that's on Jay's radar and on my radar. But well,
hang on ahead. Before we get there, Kenny Stay Thrill over here on YouTube has got a quick question for us. Should I trade Cooper Kupp and DK for Diggs? Full PPR 10 team. He would still have Higgins, Ayuk, Flowers, and Palmer. Would you trade Kupp and DK for Diggs?
No, I can't do it. It doesn't make sense to use those 2 wide receivers in a package unless I'm upgrading at a position like running back. Because your wide receiver room sounds good enough as is, where I just don't understand why we'd be making a package move to get another one. Because I think if I'm down to move Kupp and DK, but like let me get a JT right? Let me get someone like that where it's that'd be my approach there. I'm curious to what the rest of the roster is. But just from the details we have, I wouldn't do that. Your thoughts?
100% agree with that. I love the extra you put on there is I wouldn't mind trading Cup and DK myself, but it's not going to be for another wide receiver when I have an Ayuk, a Flowers, a Higgins, a Jay Palmer there. It's going to be for that banger of a back. He just adds to it. He says, I've got Eckler, Bijan, and JT.
What about that's where
you got to look
tight
at
end,
QB and tight end,
tight
and
end.
get them. Yeah,
because that's where I mean, if you've got a top QB and a top tight end already, I would maybe consider a stronger wide receiver, but I wouldn't move Cup or DK. I'd maybe move like a Josh Palmer and a Cup, or a like let me put Josh Palmer with someone rather than DK with.
Yep. I would rather take DK and Palmer or Cup and Palmer.
Yeah. And then I feel like they are getting a better. He has Hurts, so okay, you don't need a QB. What about tight end? Because that's immediately. Let me address everything else, but from there, if you can get Diggs for, say, Cooper Kupp and Josh Palmer, I would do it just because the Stafford injury. I don't necessarily want to play around and find out. Njoku and Thomas. Oh, honey, we're shopping for a tight end.
Yep.
Oh,
well, here, okay, let's pull this back up. I just want to throw this out there and see what value you think this is. Cup and DK for what tight end? What top end tight end would you?
I've got a. This is where you have to.
Let's do this. What tier of tight end?
Oh, we're going for the top. Okay. We're going for but it's very situational. You got to look at your opponent's rosters and find that team that's underperforming that has multiple tight ends, or someone that has another one they could at least consider. If a guy has Komet as a backup maybe, and he has say he's got Andrews as a starter, then maybe you can offer Cup and Palmer, right, for Andrews or something like that. But I think it's going to be tough to get that tight end unless it's someone that has another one that they can consider. Mm-hmm. Because right now, if you hit up another contender saying, hey, I want Kelsey, why would they send you Kelsey? I guess that's the kind of question I usually try and think about is what benefit is there actually for them in the process? Because otherwise it's just wasting my time and theirs. If I'm going to someone that has no benefit in losing their tight end, because then it's a position of need for them, right? So more situational. Make sure you do your research on your opponents. But with that in mind, thank you for subscribing, Kenny. Glad to have you as always. But no, definitely go pursue the tight ends. Just make sure you do your research on your teams. But go for that top tier. Personally,
and Kenny,
for me,
hit us up on Twitter as well. If you've got questions, absolutely, DM us. DMs are open, so more than happy to help you a little bit further if we have to.
And I would say maybe try and get Dalton Kincaid because I think he's not going to be priced the same way as those others.
I was thinking I was going to try to piss Jorge off and go, hey, Dallas Goedert fan, because he also has Hurts, and go ahead and get that QB tight end stack right there.
Yeah, I like that.
KJ Frederick, should I drop Deontay Foreman or Roschon Johnson for Fournette, full PPR?
I'm not dropping either of them for Fournette right now. No.
I'm not either. I understand Fournette does have the pass catching chops, but it's still one of those.
He's got the chops all right.
I've got to see it. I've got to see it in that Buffalo Bills offense because Buffalo is still Diggs, Knox, Kincaid when it comes to that passing.
Is he also on their roster listed as their mascot because he's damn near a buffalo in that backfield with how big he is?
Well, let's not talk about people's, size. I mean,
hey, he's tall.
Should I trade Devontae Adams ASAP or hold on to him? You may as well go ahead and trade him. This situation for me is not getting any better. Jimmy G is a broke down version of Derek Carr.
I would trade him
But I'm
if
not
I can
trading him
get.
for free.
Yes, I want to make sure I'm at least getting a respectable price back. You got to temper your expectations in regards to what the return is you're getting, because at this point in time it is a depreciated asset and everyone's on the same page about where Devontae is. But
Mhm.
we all still know what his talent is and how he could produce regardless of his QB if they just kind of gave him the ball. So, if the script changes at all the rest of the year, he could go back, but that's where you want to sell him to someone that still sees hope, not someone that's just trying to scrape the bottom of the barrel and give you some crap.
Yeah.
Because if I'm trading Devontae, it's still got to be something beneficial for myself. And I know some people aren't really willing to pay that based off of his current production. So don't sell too cheap.
Yeah, Kenny, I love this. The Kelsey owner in his league has Laporta on the bench. He's going to go
Yes.
target that owner.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you this.
Absolutely.
Would you do DK and Cup for Laporta?
Yes.
So you could send that trade both ways. I would send the trade DK and Cup for Kelsey,
I
and then
would
turn
send.
right around and send him the exact same trade for Laporta, and then let him make the decision. Listen, I'm going to give you two
Oh.
studs wide receivers.
Oh, I thought you meant okay, because I was thinking I would just start him with the Cup Palmer
Oh yeah,
offer.
well yeah, you
I
could do
wanna
that.
I wanna start there, see how he feels, because I think that could be good enough for someone to take if they need wide receiver. So that's where.
Okay, so then let's do this. Cup and DK for Kelsey,
Yep.
either Cup or DK, and Palmer for Laporta.
Yeah, I would do Cup and DK happily for either, but I
Yep.
want to try and get either of them for Cup and Palmer, DK and Palmer first.
That might be the way you land that deal there, Kenny, is you send the Cup and DK for Kelsey, and then tear it down a little bit. Pick one, either Cup or DK, and then add Palmer to that. So DK and Palmer for Laporta. Let him come back at you and go, well, if you'll give me Cup and DK, I'll give you Laporta. I'm
Uh,
keeping Kelsey.
Personally, I would just give him the sales pitch on the Palmer and DK or Palmer and Cup combo for one of those tight ends. I would give him that sales pitch, and then I'd really make it seem like I'm giving up more than I feel comfortable with when I make it DK and Cup.
He says he's
But,
scared off the Stafford
yeah,
injury plus the Puka usage. And I get it. I get it.
yeah. I don't blame you. I don't blame you one bit. I think every part of the Rams offense we're nervous about, even those running backs. We like them because they're so cheap, and there's going to be opportunity there. But someone like Puka and Cup, those guys are very expensive at this point. So that's where I think a lot of us are very nervous.
Guys, keep your questions coming. We're going to dive back into the waivers, but keep your questions coming. If you have them, we will pop them in as we are going. All right, Zach, let's get back into the wide receivers.
We were talking about inconsistency before with Rashid Shaheed and just kind of how boom he is one week, how bust he is another. There's another guy that is 26.8% rostered, plus 3% trending, wide receiver 49 on the year. And this is a guy I wanted to mention as a more consistent, reliable option. When I say not sexy, I mean it. Highest score so far this year, 19.7, lowest 1.7. But outside of week 1 where he scored 6.6 and week 5 where he scored 1.7, he's had at least 9.3 5 other weeks and the highest at 19.7. It's just in that range, 9 to 19. It's not a lot. It's nothing crazy, but it's consistent, and those are the type of performances that can win matchups.
Mhm.
If I get 9 guys that get me 10 to 20 points, that's putting me. I'm going to be roughly 100 to 200 points every week, and that's kind of how I was trained. Plan is rather than being enticed by these major projections or always focusing on that, but like let me just go for consistency. Like I can trust and I can plan around this, and that's where someone like Jaden Reed I like a lot. I do not like the Green Bay Packers right now. I do not like their offense. I do not trust anyone on their offense. However, one thing I do trust about this Packers team is that they will be losing and they will be throwing the ball and they will be throwing it in a frantic manner. And when they do that, opportunity will arise for Jaden Reed. This past week, when they were down pretty much the whole game against Minnesota, he had 78% snap percentage on wide receiver 36. Um, I I like his schedule the rest of the year. Favorable matchups. I expect Jordan Love to be slinging the ball around. I can't predict anything with this offense or with this team, but I don't think Matt LaFleur can at this point because he does. It doesn't seem like he knows what he's doing either. And while there's so many questions in Green Bay and with this team as a whole, now's the time to also buy someone like Jaden Reed for relatively cheap. 26.8% owned. I think with how the Packers looked and how he had 4 for 84, something like that, but it wasn't a lot, no touchdown or anything. I don't think that people are going to be using a whole bunch of fab to get him. And this is a guy I think I could get for maybe 5% fab at most. Maybe sprinkle a couple dollars, but I don't think a lot of people are lining up to get him this week. And with that in mind, he could be my more long-term play. What are your thoughts on Jaden Reed, Jay?
No, I mean this is the epitome of, we want to see the consistency from a rookie over, multiple games, and it just not be that spike, then it's a valley, then a spike week kind of a thing. But this guy, Jaden Reed, has shown that. He's over 50% snap share in every single game but one, no less than 4 targets in every game but one. Like you brought up, yes, they're playing in a negative game script. They're going to be passing. The Packers are in somewhat of a rebuild, but they've got some solid wide receivers. They've got at least what looks to be a solid quarterback. This is probably the piece that you want to have in the offense if Christian Watson, but, wide receiver wise, and he gets a very nice share,
Yeah.
both in targets and in snap share.
And they use them in a lot of creative ways. I know in the offseason they talked about doing these Deebo Samuel type plays where it's more of like pitch designs and weird stuff in the backfield as well. They haven't really scripted any of that right now, but he's someone where I think he could have a big potential the rest of the year. And he's only getting more acclimated with this offense with playing at the NFL level. And right now, these are the kind of guys you want to buy for cheap with a really good upside. We're trying to buy cheap, buy young. And like I said, we don't want to build our roster depending on rookies, but I love to target them on waivers at that midway point because this is a time where we kind of have an idea of who is who's going to be able to produce at this level and who can't. And Jaden Reed looks like he really can. With that in mind, hey, let's trust it. Because, I like Dobbs. I like Watson. I like the Packers' weapons. But there's no reason why 3 guys can't eat, especially when, Watson's just a deep ball guy. Dobbs gets some red zone stuff. But otherwise, it's just kind of all over the place. And I think Reed's one of those primary guys when it's not to those other names. So with that in mind, volume will be coming his way.
Yep. That goes right back to the next guy that I had on my list, and that's Demario Douglas. We talked about him a week or two ago, and the snap share keeps climbing. It went from 24 to 33 to 62, now to 77% last week. His targets keep climbing. Went from 2 to 3 to 6, now to 7 last week. Still waiting on that TD. But with the skill set that he has, with the speed, if he had a better caliber quarterback, a higher end quarterback outside of, mac and cheese, he wouldn't even be in this waiver wire conversation. He would have already, his rostership is like 7%. He would be up in that 45, 50, 60% rostership with a better quarterback. Now, what am I expecting? You saw what he had over the last 2 weeks, 13 targets over the last 2 weeks. This week is going to be juicy. He gets the Commanders this week. Again, it's the New England Patriots. This will probably be, like you said, the Zeke, Ramondre week. And they won't pass the ball but maybe 3 times. But all 3 times could go to Demario, and you could have 3 touchdowns out of it as well. He's just that damn good in my eyes.
I think he's the best talent at this point in their wide receiver room.
You don't like Keyshawn Boutte?
No,
No. No.
no, surprising. I know, right? Yeah. At this point, we just want to trust the talent, and the production will follow.
Yeah.
I think
All right.
that's all that needs to be said.
Kenny coming back at us. Would you do DK for Evan Ingram?
I would do Cup for Evan Ingram. I would not do DK for Evan Ingram. All right. I would, but if this is the guy that has Laporta and Kelsey and he's trying to sell me as third tight end, I would tell him I'll do Cup for Ingram straight up, or I'll give you DK in Palmer or DK and something else for Laporta. You know, I ideally want one of his two bigger ones rather than his third string one, because at this point it sounds like he's not trying to actually make a sacrifice. I like Ingram, but I like Laporta and Kelsey better.
Yeah, I do as well. I mean, I'm a huge Ingram fan. I just want to pull this right quick as we're talking about it. Where did it go? He is sitting. I know he's tight end 6 on the year. I mean, he's averaging somewhere in that 12 range. He's had that one down week, 8 targets, 4 receptions. He only had eight PPR points, but he's still averaging somewhere in that 12 to 13 range. But then you go to look at Laporta, and again, it's Laporta, and he's just getting peppered right now. He's probably averaging in that 19 range.
Yeah, and that's where I want to target Laporta or Kelsey, but I do not want to exit those trade talks without any of the three if Ingram's on that same team.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point.
Like, I want to shoot for the stars, but if I fall short, I want to at least leave this trade talks with a better tight end than what I have.
Kenny, you have led us right into a great idea. Let's talk tight ends on the waiver wire there, Zach. Lead it up.
It's a guy we've talked about before. We're going to keep just tooting our own horn, I guess, on calling these guys weeks in advance. Michael Mayer, playing at home against the Giants, down 7% in trend, 27% rostered, tight end 37 on the year, but I'm still really liking the volume that's coming his way. I got to show these rookies some love, and it wasn't volume in regards to receiving per se, but it was the highest snap percentage he's played all year. Jimmy G has looked rough. I won't even pretend to try and sell you on something else for the Raiders because yikes. But with that in mind, when I see Michael Mayer out there for 91% of the snaps, I'm just going to trust that volume is going to continue because in the past 5 weeks, he's played at least 50% or 51% in all 5. 51 being the lowest, then 66, 71, 81, and 91. So with how much he's on the field, 3 of those weeks had 3, 4, and 6 targets. So I want to trust that more volume could come in the passing game if Jimmy G can figure it out, or if they just want to give someone else a starting opportunity, that'd be pretty neat. But in general, we know they like their tight ends. And if he's on the field, I'm just generally going to trust that the opportunity will follow. And right now, Michael Mayer at 27% rostered at a bleak position. I really like this play because this is still the cheapest we're going to be able to get him.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you say? I mean, the only thing I don't like is he's not getting the targets, but just like Devontae Adams ain't getting them either. Well, Devontae Adams gets them if they call them targets because they're still 11 yards past him.
Yeah.
Same type of deal. It's a QB issue over there. And I'm not saying that it's not a Josh McDaniels issue, but the on the field is a QB issue for me. Give you one more quick question right here from itty bitty South City 650. 5-3 record, 14 team, half PPR. His QB is Geno. He's got Hill, Chase, running backs, or JT, Brees Hall. Flex is DJ Moore. His tight end is Thomas. His bench looks like this: Rice, Bourne, Henderson, Singletary, McBride. He's got Herbert. I'm sorry. He's got Kyler Murray, what is that? Is that Herbert?
Yeah,
And
and Kyler Murray.
who's Will?
Um,
K. Will on the
Kyron
IR.
Williams.
Oh, Kyron Williams. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I kept wanting to say Kenny Williams, but what is a fair trade offer for Tua? Ooh. Single quarterback, half PPR. What would you what couple of pieces? Because it's going to take a couple of pieces, right?
I guess I don't know if I'm down to. I don't know if I'm willing to make a trade for Tua with this roster.
He's 5-3. I think that's why he's asking it.
I view Kyler. He says Tua owner has Hurts, and both have bye weeks next week.
Okay.
Well,
I
if
mean,
you can,
Kyler is going to have to be the quarterback involved in this, right? Because
yes, my concern is the other assets because I don't want to lose. Obviously, we're not going to lose Hill or Chase. But
JT and Brees Hall.
Tua's been in the MVP conversation. He looks like the MVP right now. And with that in mind, I don't see how you're going to get him for anything cheap, like guys on your bench. It would have to be Kyler Murray and something else in your starting lineup. And that's where I'm just a little nervous about paying that price for.
What about a 3-for-1? Kyler Murray, DJ Moore, and Rashid Rice. Is that enough?
But then the rest of the year, you're going to upgrade at QB. To me, that's just like a push of a trade because I'm upgrading at QB from Geno to Tua. So I'm going to get like 10 points more. But I also feel like I'm probably going to get 10 points less going from DJ Moore to Bourne or McBride or Henderson or Herbert, if that makes sense.
No, it absolutely does. That's why I brought it up.
And that's where I just have a hard time. If I could do like Kyler Murray, Rashid Rice, and McBride, sure. But I doubt they're going to take that. I don't want to touch anyone in my starting lineup, though. If I could use Murray and other guys on my bench and leverage the fact that he doesn't have a starter next week, then awesome. But I think otherwise you need to. I would focus more on trying to either get a third running back for cheap or bolstering my flex spot, my second flex where I have, or not my second flex, sorry, my tight end spot where I have Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, and there's the other side of that coin too, is you do have Kyler Murray kind of be coming back hopefully this next week or the following week, and McBride on your roster with Zach Ertz being on the IR. You automatically have a stack there.
I don't know what if I'm making any moves in with this team.
Just like a wait and see team, because I mean at 5-3.
Because I guess come playoff time, my expected or my projected starting lineup would be swapping out Kyler Murray for Geno. So then at running back, I'm going to have JT and Brees Hall. Feel good about that. Wide receiver, Tyreek and Jamar. Obviously, feel great there. DJ Moore in the flex. But then I'm going to put McBride in at tight end. I think at this point, McBride looks like a strong tight end rest of the year. And with Kyler coming back and Zach Ertz still out, I expect volume to go to McBride's way. So that's where.
Quick question for you, because we're talking about the playoff time because we are halfway through the regular season as far as fantasy is concerned. The Cardinals' playoff schedule seems rough at this point. They have a bye in week 14. Then they got San Francisco, Chicago, Philly.
But that's why you have Geno.
Understood. But that's what I'm saying is that something where you try to maybe package the Kyler Murray McBride stack there? Something that's on your bench, something that's on your IR.
I need help at tight end, though, because I don't want to lean on Logan Thomas for a playoff push.
Fair. Well, that's why you go after somebody that we're talking about. Somebody very similar to like a Donald Parham, for instance. 4% rostered on Sleeper. Even with Gerald Everett on the field most of the time, Parham has still been a factor. Yes, he may be touchdown dependent, But guess what? He's getting those valuable looks. 4 touchdowns on the year through 7 games. 13 of 19, only 104 yards. But again, 4 touchdowns from the tight end position.
Hey,
Just saying.
and if you don't like him at tight end, there's another guy in the single digits that I think we need to show some love to. That's another guy for Tampa Bay, K. Dotton. At Houston this week, 7% rostered, up 1% last week. Tight end 22 on the year. Back-to-back weeks of double digits in regards to fantasy points. 2 weeks in a row with 6 targets. He had 4 receptions for 27 yards this past week. He only has 1 touchdown on the year. But one thing, again, I really want to emphasize, and this is even stronger than Meyer in this regard, he has played at least 91% of snaps every week of the season. At least 91% every week of the season. The dude doesn't miss a play. He's out there. They trust him. And, I'm going to trust that Baker feels comfortable looking his way as well. If he's out there that much, they're going to trust him not only in the blocking, but also in the receiving. With that in mind, K. Dotton seems like he's too good to be true at 7% owned and at a bleak position like the tight end is. He's already finished inside the top 24 times this year. He's yet to have a top 10 finish at tight end, but he's tight end 22 for a reason, and that's with 3 weeks that were very much so duds.
And as a Tampa fan, I love this pick that you've chosen to bring him up yet again on our show. When you look at what he has coming up, Houston, Tennessee, San Francisco, Indy, Carolina, Atlanta. Oh, by the way, in Atlanta, he played 96% of the snaps, 6 targets, 5 receptions, 43 yards. It's this dude. Who else are they going to play out there? Payne Durham? I mean, he's caught like 2 balls all year. When he's thrown the ball, he catches the ball. There has been 0 games this year where K. Dotton has had 2 drops. If they throw him 5 times, he's catching at least 4 of those balls every single game.
He plays San Francisco in week 11, and I would say that's arguably his only tough matchup the rest of the year.
And I would agree with that because he's got Green Bay in week 15. I'm sorry, Atlanta week 14, Green Bay 15, and Jacksonville.
Jacksonville 16, Carolina twice, 13 and 18. Houston once in there. This is an NFC South team, so we know it's not a bunch of tough games, or like a super tough schedule. K. Dotton looks like a primary guy of that offense. Obviously not necessarily in the receiving because it's still Evans and Godwin's first and foremost. Always has been, always will be. Why would it be anything else? But with that in mind, Otton's always out there. You know that he's going to get some sort of reps, some sort of love. And that says a lot for the tight end position when there's not a lot of guys that can say they're out there that much, let alone even getting any sort of volume. So with that in mind, someone like K. Dotton should be more than 7% rostered at this point in time.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that. All right, Zach, we are going to get out of here. Great waiver wire show. Appreciate everybody in the comments. Kenny, Itty Bitty, KJ, everybody else that was watching over there on YouTube and Twitter. Before we get out of here, Zach, I know you've got a couple other things you've got going on tonight. Go ahead and let them know what you got going on, and then we'll get out of here. Well, I'm sorry. I've been calling you Zach all night long. I cannot believe you did not correct me one time tonight. I am sorry, Mr. Burgundy.
You can find me on Channel 4 News, KWN San Diego. No, in an hour from now, you can find me on Going for Two Network. I'll be hosting for Mike, the Fantasy Cheat Sheet. Last week filling in for that. Then right after that, I will be doing the Rum Pass on the Rum Boys Network, covering the night action on TNT for NBA. We actually have another game going on at the same time. We'll be doing some bet action there, talking some hoops, maybe some football as well. Also, always trying to sprinkle in some soccer parlays and all that. We'll get into that another time. But also every Sunday morning, Going for Two Network pregame show, I host that as well. And every Tuesday, you can always find me here with Gator. Hopefully, I'll be popping in on more Fantasy and Frames shows here soon. But good seeing you as always. Glad you're safe and healthy back from your trip. Take care, everyone.
Absolutely. Once again, Please make sure you're checking out the Fantasy and Frames Wednesday. Tomorrow, Dynasty 365 kicking it off at 8 o'clock. Fourth and Frames kicking it at 9. Shoot the Gap at 10 for the IDP content. Thursday, you'll have the mailbag show with our CEO. And I believe Stacy is in Europe right now, so she may not be on that show, but it'll be Bill Mustafa and live from Europe and our CEO, Jorge B. Edwards. Don't forget, follow Zach over there at Behind the Zach, myself at FantasyJ77. But most importantly, please follow at Fantasy and Frames. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Hope everybody had a great time tonight. May your fantasy dreams, fantasy waiver dreams, come true tomorrow morning. And until next week, for Zach, for me, peace.